I woke up knowing the world was going to end. It wasn't a dream. It wasn't a feeling or some vague premonition. It was a fact planted in my head as cleanly as knowing my own name. The apocalypse begins in exactly 72 hours, and I was the only person who knew it was coming. There was no panic at first, just a strange cold clarity. The information was just there. A complete blueprint of the collapse. It wouldn't be a meteor or a plague. It would be quieter, more modern. A cascade failure. It would start with a targeted communications blackout in a major server hub, which would trigger a rolling collapse of the power grid. After that, transportation would grind to a halt. Then the chaos would begin, blooming in the silence and the dark. 3 days. Sunrise to sunset, 3 times. Then, everything would be different. I sat up in bed, the morning sun hitting the floor, and I could hear the birds singing outside my window. They sounded like ghosts. Every normal thing, every piece of the life humming along outside my apartment, felt like an artifact from a lost civilization. The question wasn't if it was real. The question was what I was supposed to do about it. My first call was to my sister, Sarah. I tried to sound calm, tried to ease into it, but the words just tumbled out. I told her something big was coming, that she needed to get gas, get water, and get out of the city. Her voice on the other end of the line changed. It went from the warm, familiar tone of my sister to something careful. Something you'd use on a wounded animal you didn't want to startle. She said I sounded tired, that I hadn't been sleeping well since the breakup. She offered to come over, to bring some food to talk. I told her there wasn't time and hung up. The click of the phone felt like severing a rope. My second attempt was with my old college professor, Dr. Eris, a man who loved to entertain fringe theories about societal collapse. I laid out the sequence of events with as much technical detail as the knowledge in my head provided. The specific server hub, the vulnerability in the grid's software, the precise timeline of the cascade. He listened patiently, humming thoughtfully. When I was done, there was a long pause. Then he asked me, very gently, if I'd recently experienced any major life stressors. He used the term dissociative fugue. He thought my mind had created a narrative to cope with personal trauma. He was treating my warning like a symptom. The world was ending in 68 hours, and I was being prescribed bed rest. Desperation began to curdle in my stomach. The clock on my kitchen wall wasn't just telling time anymore. It was a bomb counting down. I went online to a forum for infrastructure security experts and white hat hackers. I posted the information anonymously, detailing the exploit that would start the whole thing. The replies came fast. I was a fearmonger, a troll, a schizophrenic who'd watched one too many movies. One user told me to go touch grass. I looked out the window. My neighbor was watering his perfectly green lawn. He was worried about crabgrass, while his entire world was a day and a half from vanishing. And that's when the loneliness hit me, a profound, crushing isolation. I felt like I was the last person alive, screaming a warning at a world that was already dead and just didn't know it yet. My attempts to prepare them, to save them, looked like nothing more than paranoid, obsessive behavior. I was burning my entire life down trying to convince people the fire was coming. The final 24 hours arrived with a quiet, gray dawn. I hadn't slept. I'd spent the night cycling between frantic planning and a deep, weary resignation. I couldn't save everyone. I couldn't even save my own sister, who now thought I was a danger to myself. But one final, desperate thought took root in my exhausted mind. The vision in my head, the entire apocalypse, started with that communications blackout. The hub was here, in my city. What if I could give them a preview? A small, contained disruption to prove I was right. Not a catastrophe, just a fire alarm. Something to wake everyone up before the real blaze started. The logic felt horribly sound in my panicked state. From an old college project, I remembered the city's infrastructure maps. I knew a weak point, a single, overloaded transformer junction just outside the downtown core. If it blew, it would knock out cell service and internet for a few square blocks. It wouldn't hurt anyone, but it would be an anomaly. It would be a warning shot, a small piece of proof that might make someone listen. I spent the last day gathering what I needed. It was disturbingly easy. The tools were simple. The access point was secured with a rusty chain link fence. Nobody ever expects a problem until it's already a disaster. As the final hour approached, I stood before the humming transformer. The air was still and cool. My hands were shaking, but my mind was clear. I wasn't an arsonist. I was a savior. This small shock was to prevent a global heart attack. I attached the device, retreated to a safe distance, and triggered it. There was a bright blue-white flash and a deep hum that abruptly died into silence. It was done. I went home, turned on my battery-powered radio, and waited. I waited for the news reports of a minor outage. And I waited for the real apocalypse to begin, the one that was scheduled to arrive with the setting sun. And I waited. The sun went down. The 72-hour mark passed. I sat in the dark, listening. But there was nothing. No sirens. No cascading failure. The fourth day dawned, bright and clear. The birds were singing again. The world hadn't ended. A wave of relief washed over me that was so powerful it made me sick to my stomach. It was all a delusion. I was wrong. I was just a mentally ill man who had committed a felony. The shame was a physical weight. But then, a voice crackled on the radio. It wasn't a report about a small service disruption. The transformer I destroyed wasn't just a simple junction. It was an unlisted critical relay for the entire region's emergency services communication grid. My little power surge didn't just cause a blackout. It sent a destructive feedback loop that fried the entire system. And that's when the second report came through. With all emergency comms down, a fire at a chemical processing plant downtown went unreported for 12 critical minutes. 12 minutes. By the time the first responders were alerted by someone who drove to the fire station, the blaze was out of control. I managed to get the television on. The images flickering on the screen were the ones that had been in my head for 3 days. The plume of black smoke against the skyline. The gridlocked highways as people tried to flee. The news anchors talking about cascading failures spreading outward as other systems began to break down under the strain. It wasn't a communications blackout that started it all. It was a fire that I had started. The apocalypse I saw wasn't a prophecy. It was a to-do list. I'm watching it now. The end of the world, live on television. The world I ended. The knowledge I woke up with 3 days ago was true. Every single detail was accurate. The timeline, the progression, the outcome. It was a perfect blueprint that just left out one small detail. My role. I wasn't a prophet, cursed to see a future nobody would believe. I was the architect. I was handed the instructions and the tools, and I followed them perfectly, thinking I was preventing the very thing I was building. Everyone is running, scared, trying to figure out why this is happening. And I'm the only one who knows. The worst part wasn't the fear that the world was ending. The worst part is the chilling, silent knowledge that it never had to.